Hey gang, I just wanted to preface this episode by saying that the audio is a little bit spotty, but I cleaned it up as much as I could, and there's tons of great info in here that Brian shares with us, so enjoy the episode. Welcome to the N1 Fitness Podcast. Today we've got Brian Wansink on the show. Brian is a professor at Cornell University in consumer behavior and marketing research and studies eating behavior and how it's impacted by the environment. He's also the author of multiple books, including Mindless Eating, which is a personal favorite of mine. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Marcus.
Awesome, man. Well, before we dig into our topic today, can you just give folks a little bit of background on how you got into all this food behavior stuff to begin with?
Yeah. Well, so I grew up in the Midwestern part of the United States in Iowa, and everybody in Iowa does something related to food, either directly or indirectly. And when I was a little boy, I would sell vegetables door to door and taking by my wagon. And what was interesting is back then I was somewhat puzzled why one house would buy every single thing that I had, and the very next house, perfectly the exact same demographically, sociographically, income, everything, would look at me instead like I had a wagon of kryptonite. And I thought, well, that's crazy. I mean, how can somebody's view toward food be so dramatically different when these people appear to be almost exactly the same? And then since then, I've kind of asked myself a number of questions about this sort of thing, and I found it kind of funny that you're the smartest person you know, okay, would not be able to tell you why they ate what they ate for breakfast today, okay? No, they let me stumble out a reason. I believe it's because of, but in reality, they don't know why they did that. They don't know why they poured as much as they poured. They don't know whether it changed to 10% more from yesterday or the day before. And if the smartest people we know can't really answer these questions, it means there's a lot of opportunity for the things around us to negatively influence us. But there's also a lot of opportunity for these things around us to positively influence us if we know what they are and we make the changes.
Right. That's a great point. Now, touching on your book, Mindless Eating, what is your definition of mindless eating, and what does it exactly mean to mindlessly eat? Well,
mindlessly eat means kind of to make these decisions without really knowing you're doing it. And, that's okay, because nobody wants to be the person that kind of is thinking about every single move they make, every single time they pour, because it's just really not worth it. I mean, we've got too many other cool things to do in life than to focus on every decision and make it like we're buying a car or something like that. And so the whole thing about mindless eating is, it's kind of funny. People will call them, or they'll talk and they'll say, well, and clearly the solution to mindless eating is mindful eating. It's like, if you are one of the 5% of the population who can do that, that's great. You'll enjoy food more. You'll probably eat less. But if you're like the rest of us and you come home from work with like 15 things to do on your to-do list and telephone's ringing and the dog's running around and kids are screaming, you don't have time to cut the pea in half and taste the pea, And that's why the solution to mindless eating is simply to set up your environment so you mindlessly eat better rather than mindlessly eat too much, which is what most of us do.
And that leads perfectly into your term, the nutritional gatekeeper. So can you elaborate on that for us and just tell us how important that role is in the household?
Sure. Yeah, sweet segue there. Yeah. No. Yeah. So the whole idea of the nutritional gatekeeper is that if you're the nutritional gatekeeper is the person who purchases and prepares the majority of food in a household, influencing the vast majority, we find about 70-75% of what their family eats, either for the better or for the worse. People can say, there's nothing I can do to get my 13-year-old to eat better, or my 8-year-old to eat the vegetables. But what they do is they focus on the one or two instances that they remember recently where they didn't eat all their peas. Okay, and so they just took their hands and they effectively say, if I can't control 100% of what I'm trying to encourage them to eat, then why do I even waste my time? And I think the powerful thing about nutritional gatekeepers, our finding has been that, even if you just control 2/3 or 3/4 of what your family eats, either for the better or for the worse, it's worth trying. Okay, it's worth having a fruit bowl instead of a cookie dish on your counter. It's worth going to a restaurant that actually serves maybe salads, not just fried chicken. It's worth giving them some kind of fruit to take to lunch instead of just giving them $2 and say, buy whatever you want. And that is the power of the nutritional gatekeeper that's typically overlooked by a lot of people.
Totally, man. I love that practical point because, even small changes here and there add up to potentially big changes down the road. So that's great. Now, you've done a bunch of studies in your lab, and one that really sticks out to me is the soup study for some reason. But can you touch on, say, 2 or 3 of your personal favorite studies and then some of the results to just illustrate how important that food environment is and how it impacts our nutritional intake?
Yeah, so about 20 years ago, they started accidentally finding that the size or shape of packages that people were serving themselves out of was having this major impact, like about a 20% impact on people. Like if you give people a large box of Wheaties versus a super large box of Wheaties, they'd pour 20% more on a super large box without even thinking about it, even though there's plenty of food in both cases. And so I started saying, geez, there's a ton of these things that are day-to-day life. And there's a whole range of things that end up providing these perceptual cues that lead people to pour too much, whether it be the size of the plate or whether it be the size of a cereal box, whether it be the size of a serving spoon. And when we initially came up with this, people would say, well, maybe, but that doesn't influence me because if I'm over-serving by 20%, I know when to stop. It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe you do, but why don't we see? But what would happen if your bowl never emptied? Would you actually know you were full?
Right. Yeah, probably not.
And so that's what we did. We kind of created this refillable soup bowl. Actually, the last remaining one is still upstairs in my garage. And people would sit down. We had 3 of them. People would bring people in, and they would eat. And unknowingly to them, as they ate their soup, there's a hole drilled in the bottom of it with some tubing, and would imperceptibly rise so that they wouldn't ever finish their soup unless they ate over 6 quarts of it. And what we found is people ended up eating about 70% more soup if their soup was refilling. It was crazy. But the thing was, again, we'd say, so are you pretty full? No, how could I be full? I only ate half a bowl of soup. I'm not full. And then it gets us to the idea that we count with our eyes, not with our stomach. Okay, we eat with our eyes. We see how much we're going to eat, and we say, yep, that's going to be a full plate of food. That's what I want, a full plate of food. In fact, the plate's smarter. It doesn't really seem to... That biases us as long as it's not too small.
Right. Yeah, that's really important, that point about us eating with your eye or eating with our eyes. So we've all heard the term comfort food. So can you tell us a little bit about your findings around comfort food and how the choices tend to differ between men and women in a general sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of people, when you think of comfort foods, they'll say, you think of like large gooey sundaes or, I don't know, pie a la mode or I don't know, something like that. But we asked people what their favorite comfort food was, and then we actually asked them to rate some different things too. And one of the surprising things we found is that men and women have very different comfort foods, okay? In fact, I think the only one in the top 5 for either men or women that overlaps is ice cream. But for women... for men rather, they would have comfort foods that weren't necessarily unhealthy foods. That's crazy. We're expecting ice cream, the cake, the cookies, hot shit cookies. No, their comfort foods are hamburgers, pizza, steak, pasta, soup, the things that are relatively healthy in small enough quantities. Okay. And you say, well, those sound like comfort foods. What do you think, women? And they go, they're comfort foods, but they're not that comforting to me. Because when I think of those foods, I don't think of somebody, taking care of me and making me feel like a king or queen and making me the soup or somebody bringing me the steak. I think of myself having to do it for somebody else, a spouse or whoever. And so they said, so to me, comfort foods end up being sweet, ready-to-eat foods. They're much more likely to say things like, cake and cookies and things that they wouldn't necessarily have to make, but are much more snack and dessert related. And the cool takeaway from this, you can say, well, men and women are different. Okay, well, what do I do with that? Well, what you can do with it is really important. Is that the average rating of how much men found certain foods comforting versus women, it might have been different, but it wasn't that different, and it wasn't so different that you can't say, if I want a comfort food, maybe ice cream is at the top of the list, or maybe homemade brownies at the top of the list, but not much below that is hot soup. Not much below that is steak. Maybe what I can do is I can substitute those things out for something that's just a little less comforting, and it's not going to make any difference psychologically to me. But half an hour later, we'll eat a real food that's probably a whole lot less caloric.
That's super interesting. Now, you talk about our stomachs having sort of 3 distinct settings. So can you tell us about those 3 quote-unquote settings and then how they impact our eating habits?
Sure. Yeah. So in one extreme, the setting is, I'm starving.
Yeah.
Okay. The other extreme is, I am so full, I am going to explode. I feel gross. I hate myself. I actually hate life at this point. I've eaten so much. And in between those 2 extremes, there is, I can eat more. Okay. But we are hugely flexible on how much we can eat, and it almost just pushes us farther and farther and farther over here. And it's all these cues around us that are what pushes in that direction. The cues, we talked a little bit about some of the cues that you can change out like that, which would be the size of plates, the size of serving utensils, the size of serving pots, whether it's on the table in front of you or whether it's not. But it also ends up being the cues of things around us, like what the person's doing right next to us. And some of those things we can change and some of the things we can't. But knowing what we can change can reduce a lot that tendency to just push toward, I'm so full, I hate myself.
Yeah. Okay. So not going to that extreme. Now, you touched on this a little bit, but most of us kind of think or seem to think that we're too smart to be influenced by things as small as glass size, plate size, utensils, maybe even grazing habits. Can you tell us a little bit more about how these simple things, plates, cutlery, glasses, can change our consumption patterns?
Yeah. In almost all these things, we find that this is just stuff is just so robust. Anytime you go into a real situation where people are eating for real, like it could be a buffet, it could be a party, it could be something like this, we find that changing almost any of those things changes how much people eat from 15 to 25%. So you give people a smaller plate, they eat 15 to 25% more. You give the food in 2 smaller serving bowls rather than 1 big serving bowl, they take less. All this is very easy. Now, what's interesting is that in lab situations, if you bring somebody in repeatedly, day after day after day, and have cameras focused on them, they don't behave that way because they're kind of freaked out.
Right.
But in all normal situations, we find that this stuff's super robust. But the thing about it is that, and even with glasses, we find that if you have a glass like this, a tall, skinny glass versus a short, wide glass, and people fill it with something, they feel short. They pour more in short, wide glasses than tall, narrow glass like this. Because the deal is when you pour a liquid, you're kind of looking to get up like this. and with short white glasses, it's filling up pretty quickly, but it's not going up quite so much. And we find that even with professional bartenders, when we ask them to pour shots of alcohol, they pour about 30% more in these short, fat tumblers than they do the kind of the tall highball glasses. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're pouring water, but if you're pouring something you don't want to overdrink, or with kids, so I got 3 little girls, and we like them to drink lots of milk. And so what we have for their milk glasses are these short, fat, little wide glasses, because they can all pour their own, and we know they're going to pour more in the short, wide glasses.
Those are super useful tips. And yeah, especially when it comes to things like alcohol. I mean, a bar's margins, the money they make is depending on, something as simple as tall, thin glasses versus short, wide ones. Why not make the shift, right?
Yeah, that's cool. You mentioned that. I think that article that we did, it came out maybe in 2003 or 2005, a few years ago. And when it came out shortly, I don't know how this came up, but sure, I got something in the mail that said it's like one of the top 10 most important findings for restaurants and bars that year. Wow. Which makes you think, oh my God, what are the other 9 are?
Now people are mad at you because they're not getting as stiff drinks, right?
Yeah, that's the takeaway that a bunch of people have. I mean, I know lots of funny people, and so that's the takeaway most of them have.
That's awesome, man. Now, the research shows that we make, 200 plus food decisions per day, not to mention all the other decisions we make on, what to wear, what plans to make, what to do at work, etc. So how much do you think that decision fatigue plays in here when it comes to food decisions?
Well, yeah, it would if we were, again, that 5% of people who are focusing on what we eat. But again, that is, very few of us, because most people, unless you are on, a crazy strict diet, or unless you're somebody who's just that type of person who, kind of keeps a formal, informal food diary. Most of that, the 200 decisions, no more difficult than the first decision, because we didn't think about any of them. What might change over the course of the day is that as we become more tired, it's not that our decisions become poor. It's just that we want something to sort of reward ourselves for.
Makes sense if people are, hey, I had a hard day, and I'm going to reward myself with A, B, or C because I deserve it, and the resistance to that is just sort of declines throughout the day as somebody gets more and more tired, which makes sense. Something I've noticed anecdotally with myself as well as with my nutritional coaching clients is how alcohol seems to impact food decisions in a slightly different way between people. So some people tend to consume more when they drink, food-wise, that is, and some people just kind of tend to forget about food in general. So do you have any insights or theories around alcohol or food intake? Are you guys going to study this at all?
Yeah, we've done quite a bit behind alcohol and food take. That's kind of interesting. A lot of it we haven't gotten published because that's just hard to get published because the standards change. And so you say, "Oh, we did this really cool study and blah blah blah," and they're like, "Yeah, now in order to get that published, what you need to have is you have to have affidavits saying they're not going to drive, and you need to have this and this and this. And if you didn't collect that back when you instead, you're kind of stuck with things that you know a lot about, but no one else ever will because you can't publish it in the academic journals."
Right.
But one of the things, so one of the things that is kind of neat with food, and I think your insight that kind of creates this diversion that some people eat a whole lot less and some people eat a whole lot more is spot on. And the main thing that ends up dictating that, you can go back and you can kind of analyze what's happened when you see these different people in the past or with yourself. Typically, much of it boils down to opportunity. Okay, so if somebody's kind of hungry and you kind of start drinking, the alcohol will kind of fill you up, or at least it'll take your mind off of things, and so you can go like a whole night kind of drinking wine. You might get a little dizzy or a little bit of, you don't necessarily need to eat. Okay, but if there is food that is compatible with whatever you're drinking and is around, most people will almost assuredly end up overeating the food that's available. It's just that it's not around, you tend to go, I'm not that hungry. However, it's just like, well, yeah, but there's some meat buffet here. Ooh, look at the stuff over there. Ooh, look, there's some hot stuff over there. You'll do it. But it's got to be something that's compatible with the drink, because if it's like hot and nicely made chocolate chip cookies or brownies, that may not strike you as essentially as compatible with what you're drinking. So you can, in those cases, you can leave that behind or alone.
Oh, that's a great point.
Opportunity. Yeah, it's the opportunity of food, but the opportunity of matching paired food.
Right. Yeah, wine and charcuterie boards go pretty well together. So.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, that's right. But wine and cigars, less.
Right. Yeah.
So the crazy danger of these sort of things is when you get into it's called the road to Abilene, and the metaphor is that the family's trying to make a decision whether they want to go to Abilene for the day, Abilene, Texas for the day, for wherever they live, and they make the decision to do this because nobody wants to go, but nobody says, I guess it's okay, but nobody's really that desires to go there because nobody stands up and says, no, they're doing something that collectively they don't really want to do. And that road to Abilene was drinking people and so being places like Taco Bell, all you diners, all that things like this that we might kind of go, is anybody hungry? Well, we may not be hungry, but if somebody kind of goes, yeah, I think I am, and then all the rest of us go, well, I could eat if it's in front of me. Okay. And
that's so true.
Like
I could eat. That's like the classic, the classic line.
Yeah, and especially if you like the people around you, you don't want to be the person who says no.
Right.
Or you don't want to be the person who says, I'm going to go, but I just won't order. And since this whole road to Abilene, you end up taking a day trip somewhere where nobody really wants to go just because everybody thought everybody else wanted to go.
Yeah, those social factors are huge. Now, Brian, let's let folks know what they can do from more of a practical standpoint. So how do you recommend that people set up their food environment for nutritional success?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the thing is, when in the book Slow My Design chapter, each of the chapters says, here's what you can do in these different environments. There's a scorecard of 100 things, 0, 1, yes, no, that if it's going on in your house is making you fit and not fat. If you're getting, 30 checked yes out of 100, your house is probably making you fat rather than fit. Now, and the thing is to give people 100 things, say, go forth. I mean, I can get, even my house is an 100. It's probably an 86 on any given day, which I think is amazing, but it fluctuates. But the thing is to make the changes that are relevant to the food problems that a particular person's having. So, for instance, and that it's like, well, we all eat too much. It's like, no, we don't. Okay, I might have a tendency to overeat at mealtime, meal stuffing, and you might have a tendency to kind of snack graze. Another person over there might just be a desktop diner or dashboard diner where they eat when they're doing something else, like in the car, at work, or something like that. And all those are distinct differences because even though we can all identify all these different situations of overeating, at any one time for any of us, there's only really one of them that's really most troublesome. Because you think you can't, like, meal stuff, snack graze, desktop. You can't do everything because there's really probably only one or two you're doing. And so the thing is to figure out what that is. And let's say, for instance, that you have a, well, give me an idea. What is, tell me about a client that you've recently seen. What was their biggest problem?
I think typically snacking and grazing is pretty huge. That's a common issue.
Okay. So in a case like that, one of the easier changes. We'd kind of figure out where I was at, whether it was at work, whether it was driving, whether it was at home. But let's say it's at home, meaning at home. One of the things that can be done very easily is making sure that you only have a fruit bowl as the only visible food in your house. In the book Slim by Design, which is the follow-up book, we talked about a study where we went into all these people's homes and we took pictures of everything in the house or the kitchen, and we weighed people, and we found that the typical person who has a fruit bowl in their kitchen weighs 10 to 12 pounds less than the neighbor right there who doesn't.
Yeah, and that was on average with the whole family, wasn't it?
Well, usually it's the parents, because we all the measures of all the kids. It's mainly, it's just, and in some cases, even just the main person, the nutritional gatekeeper.
Gotcha.
But the thing is, if you even had, one of the big surprises was that if people had breakfast cereal, even the really healthy breakfast cereal, sitting anywhere on their counter, on average they weighed about 22 pounds more than their neighbor.
Wow.
Because it's always here. So, I think I'll have some. How bad can it be? The person on the cover looks pretty attractive and she's smiling, so it's good for me.
It's like a buff cartoon or something, yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty easy because so there's a lot of small things you can do, such as doing things like that, making sure that that there's easy fruits that are eye level in your refrigerator, making sure that at work if you have that candy just so it can be social, that's off your desk. But there's also a bunch of really cool things that you can do to try to troubleshoot things yourself. Like, so for instance, we had a cool experience. A cool experience one time. I was doing a makeover for a gossip columnist for a big New York City magazine, and she wanted me to kind of go through things. And one of the things I said is, okay, we'll start at your home. I said, we'll start with your refrigerator. And she says, no, the problem's not my refrigerator. There's nothing in it. And it ends up being that was one of the big sources of the problem, because if you come home and you're kind of a little bit hungry for a snack or whatever, and there's nothing in your refrigerator, well, what are you going to do?
You might say, order in, yeah.
Well, you might order food, you might get a carry out or whatever, but whereas a 300-calorie healthier snack might have satisfied you, instead, you're not going to order take-in for 300 calories. You're going to order that entire fill in the blank, pizza, burrito, whatever. And one of the things we did with her is, in some follow-up stuff, we just said, if your snack is a problem, one thing is have at least 6 single servings of protein in your refrigerator. Okay, and then that could be string cheese or yogurt or egg or tofu with egg or a tuna fish. But just six single servings, because at least at that point you're not going to come home and say, "There's nothing to eat. It's donut time."
Those are great tips, man. Now, before we start to wrap up here, is there anything that we didn't get to today that you would want to mention or leave the listeners with? Anything like that?
One thing that's important is that a lot of people, what we found repeatedly, and we've in some of the kind of clinical related stuff that we've done, is that a lot of people will say, "Yeah, I can that stuff. I can see that it can be bad for other people, but not for me." I don't think I wouldn't be tricked by what the person's doing across the table. I would eat more if the TV's on in the kitchen. I know when I'm full, and if the food's on the table in front of me instead of over the stove, I stop when I'm full. That's just me. And we find a huge percent of people. It's the lowest we've ever found in these studies, about 70% who say, "Cool, but that wouldn't influence me." And because we're not willing to kind of acknowledge that something the size of a bowl, that bowls are smarter than we are. That's why we get tricked so easily by these things.
Okay, so yeah, don't assume that we're sort of above these minor cues that can, make us overeat. Gotcha. Now, can you let folks know where they can find out more about you, your books, and the amazing work that you're doing?
Yeah. If you go to the website, healthierbydesign.org, healthierbydesign.org, you can get all sorts of cool stuff.
Awesome. I'll link to that in the show notes. And thanks so much for taking the time to come on the podcast and chat with us, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it too, Marcus. And thanks for what you do also.
Awesome, guys. I'll catch you guys on the next episode.